I came home late from work, still smelling faintly of the burnt coffee from the office break room, and the first thing I noticed was the journal. It was sitting dead center on my kitchen table, leather-bound, dark brown, edges frayed like it had been carried around for years, though I'd never seen it before. My apartment isn't the kind of place where things just appear. I keep it locked, I don't have guests, and my neighbors keep to themselves. The blinds were drawn, the air still, except for the faint hum of the fridge. I stood there staring at it for a good 30 seconds, thinking maybe I'd brought it home without remembering. Maybe it was a leftover from the previous tenant, but then I saw the page it was open to. My name, my handwriting, and a list of everything I'd done over the past 3 days. What time I left for work, what groceries I bought, the exact moment I tripped over a crack in the sidewalk and swore under my breath. It was unnervingly precise, down to details no one could have noticed unless they were with me every second. My chest tightened. I turned the page. More entries, all written as if from my perspective, in my voice, using words I would actually choose. They weren't just notes, they were thoughts I'd had, but I hadn't written any of them. I checked the rest of the apartment. Everything was as I'd left it that morning. My keys were still in my coat pocket. The lock on the door looked untouched. I picked up the journal and felt a chill. It was cold, as if it had been sitting in the fridge instead of on the table. The earliest entry was from exactly 4 weeks ago, but that was impossible. 4 weeks ago, I was in Chicago on a business trip, staying in a hotel that didn't even have my home address. I read the entry anyway. It described an argument I had with a co-worker that day, an argument I'd never told anyone about, one I'd almost forgotten myself. My phone buzzed suddenly, and I dropped the journal onto the floor. It was a text from an unknown number. Check the last page. My fingers were trembling when I flipped to the back. The last page was dated tomorrow. It said I would call in sick to work, skip breakfast, walk to the corner store at exactly 9:14 a.m., and see a man in a gray coat drop something into the storm drain. Then it said, "Don't let him see you." I slammed the book shut and stared at it like it might explode. My first thought was to burn it, but some stubborn part of me wanted to see if tomorrow would play out exactly as written. I didn't sleep much that night. In the morning, I did call in sick, but only to test the journal's prediction. At 9:14 a.m., I was standing across from the corner store, heart pounding. And there he was, a man in a gray coat, moving with quick, nervous steps, looking over his shoulder. He dropped something small and metallic into the drain, glanced around, and walked away without noticing me. I wanted to run after him, to ask who he was, but instead I crossed the street and knelt by the drain. I could see the object, a key, old and rusted, dangling just out of reach. My phone buzzed again. Leave it. Same number. I looked up, scanning the street, but no one was paying me any attention. The journal felt heavier in my backpack now, almost like it knew I was holding back. I went home, locked the door, and read the next entry. It was dated the following day. It said I would get a knock at the door from a woman I'd never met, who would ask for the journal by name. It ended with 3 words underlined twice. Don't trust her. The knock came at 10:03 a.m., just like the journal said, 3 sharp raps that echoed through my apartment as if the sound had been rehearsed. I stood there with my hand on the doorknob, my pulse pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home, to wait it out, but the curiosity was worse than the fear. I opened the door a few inches, just enough to see her, late 30s maybe, dark hair pulled into a tight braid, wearing a black coat despite the mild weather. She smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "You have something of mine," she said, her voice calm, too calm. "The journal." I froze. The word rolled out of her mouth like she knew exactly what it meant to me. "I think you've made a mistake," I said, but my voice didn't sound convincing, even to myself. She tilted her head, studying me like she could read my thoughts. "I don't make mistakes," she said. "You've been reading it. That's dangerous." I asked her who she was, but she ignored the question and took a small step forward, the tip of her boot crossing the threshold before I even realized I hadn't fully closed the door. "Give it to me, and I'll make sure you don't get hurt," she said. Something about the way she emphasized "don't" made my skin crawl. I tightened my grip on the door and told her to leave. Her smile faded, and she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. That book doesn't belong here." The phrase "didn't belong here" stuck in my head. twisting into something worse when I remembered the metallic chill of the journal's cover, like it had been somewhere far from my kitchen table. I slammed the door before she could say anything else and locked it, my hands shaking so badly I dropped the deadbolt twice before it caught. I didn't move away from the door until I heard her footsteps fading down the hallway. I grabbed the journal from my backpack and opened it to the latest entry. A new line had appeared under the part about the woman's visit. She will be back tonight. She won't be alone. That's when the apartment phone rang. Not my cell, but the dusty landline I'd never used, the one that had come with the place. I picked it up and heard a man's voice I didn't recognize. "If she comes back, don't answer," he said, his tone urgent but oddly controlled. "And for God's sake, don't let them see the key." I asked who he was, but the line went dead. My mind flashed to the key in the storm drain. I hadn't taken it, but clearly, someone thought I had. I spent the rest of the day pacing, checking the peephole every few minutes, watching the street from behind the blinds. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the journal wasn't just predicting. It was pulling me into a sequence of events I couldn't step out of. At 8:46 p.m., I saw movement in the hallway camera feed from my phone app. Two figures, one of them the woman, the other a man in a dark gray hoodie. They stopped outside my door. The feed glitched for a moment, the image warping like static on an old TV, and when it cleared, they were gone. No footsteps, no knocking, just gone. I opened the journal again, desperate for answers, and saw a brand new entry dated for tomorrow. "You will wake to find the journal missing. You will have less than an hour to get it back." I woke up to the sound of drawers being opened, the soft scrape of wood against wood, and for a second I thought I was still dreaming, but then the cold reality hit me. The journal was gone. I jumped out of bed, my bare feet hitting the floor hard, my eyes darting to the desk where it had been the night before. Empty. The entry from yesterday had been right down to the minute. I glanced at my watch, 7:02 a.m. I had less than an hour. I ran to the door, half expecting it to be chained shut from the outside, but it opened easily, the hallway empty. I didn't think. I just started moving, checking the stairwell, the lobby, my eyes scanning every corner. It was there in the lobby that I saw him, a tall man in a wrinkled navy coat, leaning against the vending machine like he'd been waiting for me. "You're late," he said without looking up from the phone in his hand. "They're already ahead of you." I asked him who he was, but he shook his head. "No time. Do you want it back or not?" His voice was sharp, impatient, like he'd had this conversation in his head 100 times already. I nodded, and he motioned for me to follow. We stepped out onto the street, the morning air heavy with the smell of rain, the sky that pale gray that makes you think the day might never fully wake up. He led me down 2 blocks, turning into an alley I'd walked past 100 times but never noticed. Narrow, with brick walls that leaned in like they wanted to keep secrets. "They think you still have the key," he said as we moved quickly, our footsteps echoing. "That's the only reason you're still alive." I told him about the woman, about the storm drain, about the man on the phone, and he listened without slowing, without looking back. "She's not from here," he said finally. "Neither is he. They've crossed over. The journal, it's how they find people like you." That stopped me. "People like me?" I asked. He glanced at me then, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes, not pity exactly, but a kind of tired understanding. People who can read it. Most can't. To them it's just static on a page. We turned another corner, and there was a door, metal and unmarked, set into the side of a warehouse. He pulled a small device from his pocket, pressed it against the lock, and it clicked open. Inside, the air was colder, and the light came from long, buzzing strips overhead. He led me past rows of shelves stacked with boxes, through a curtain of heavy plastic strips, into a small room with a single table. The journal was there, sitting in the middle like it had been waiting for me. I reached for it, but he put a hand on my arm. "Not yet," he said. "Once you touch it, you're bound again. You need to understand what that means." He told me about the fractures, thin places between realities, some stable, some constantly shifting, and how the journals were maps, each one anchored to a different version of the world. If you could read one, you could navigate the fractures. If you couldn't, it was just meaningless ink. "And if they get the key?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Then they can open a gate anywhere. No boundaries, no control. You think your world is fragile now?" He didn't have to finish the thought. I could see it in his face. I asked him why he was helping me, and he hesitated before saying, "Because I've read mine, and I know what happens if I don't." He pushed the journal toward me, and the moment my fingers touched the cover, I felt the same metallic chill, but stronger this time, like the air around me had thinned. A new page turned on its own, words forming as if written by an invisible hand. "One of you will betray the other before nightfall." I looked up at him, my stomach sinking, but his expression didn't change. "We need to move," he said. We left through a back door that opened into another alley, this one littered with broken pallets and rusted metal drums. The air was heavier now, the sky darker, as if the day itself had decided to skip ahead to evening. He walked fast, almost too fast, glancing over his shoulder every few steps, and I matched his pace even though my legs ached. I kept thinking about the line in the journal, about betrayal before nightfall, and every time his eyes flicked toward me, I wondered if he was already thinking of how to do it. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice lower than I intended. "Somewhere they can't listen," he said, which wasn't much of an answer. We turned down another street, then ducked into an old laundromat with flickering fluorescent lights and machines that looked like they'd been out of order for years. The smell of detergent was faint, overpowered by something metallic. "Sit," he said, pointing to a bench along the wall. He pulled out his phone, but the screen was blank, no signal. Then he took a small notebook from his coat and began scribbling quickly, tearing out the page and sliding it across to me. "They have people in both worlds. Don't trust anyone who knows your name." My pulse kicked harder. I started to write back, but he held up a hand and shook his head. Instead, he began pulling things from his coat, a small black device with a red light, a folded piece of paper with symbols that hurt to look at, and a worn photograph of a woman standing in front of a house that didn't look like any I'd ever seen. "She was my sister," he said, his voice almost lost under the hum of the lights. "They took her 2 years ago. My journal said I'd never see her again if I stayed. So I left everything. Now I'm trying to make that choice mean something." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. But then there was a sound outside. Footsteps, more than one set, quick and getting closer. He swore under his breath, grabbed the photograph, shoved the rest of the items back into his coat, and yanked me toward the back of the laundromat. There was another door, locked, but he kicked it twice and it gave way, opening into a narrow service corridor. We ran, our footsteps slapping against the concrete, the echo chasing us as much as whoever was behind. The corridor opened into a stairwell, and we took the steps 2 at a time, up, up, until we hit the roof. The wind was sharp up here, pulling at my clothes, carrying the faint smell of rain. The city stretched out around us, muted under the gray. I turned toward him, but he wasn't looking at me. He was scanning the rooftop across the street. That's when I saw the figures, 3 of them, all in dark coats, standing perfectly still. The middle one raised a hand, and I felt it, that same metallic chill, but flooding my whole body, making it hard to breathe. My knees almost buckled. "Don't look at them," he hissed, grabbing my arm. "We can't fight them here." He pulled me toward a low wall on the far side of the roof, and before I could protest, we were climbing over and down a rusted fire escape. The metal groaned under our weight, and halfway down, I glanced up. The 3 figures were gone. That should have been a relief, but instead it made my stomach twist harder. We hit the ground and slipped into another alley, this one ending at a chain-link fence. He climbed it in seconds, but when I reached the top, I heard something, a voice, low and calm, coming from right behind me. "It's not him you need to worry about." I spun, but there was no one there. Just empty air and the hum of the city. I jumped down, landing hard, and he didn't ask what was wrong, just kept moving. Finally, we reached a small brick building with boarded-up windows. Inside, it was dark except for the light from a single candle on the floor. He closed the door, slid a heavy bolt into place, and leaned against it. "We can't keep running like this," he said, his voice raw. "We have 1 shot left. We open the journal together, and we go where it tells us. But once we cross, there's no coming back." My mind was a mess of fear and doubt, but before I could answer, there was a sound above us, slow, deliberate footsteps on the roof. We looked at each other, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Then the candle went out. The darkness was absolute, thick enough that I couldn't even see my own hands. My breathing was loud in my ears, too fast, and I forced myself to slow it down. Somewhere above, the footsteps stopped. Then came a scraping sound, metal against metal, like something being dragged. "Stay still," he whispered, and I could feel the tension radiating off him in the blackness. A faint glow appeared to my left, not from the candle, but from the journal. It was in my bag, and now its edges were pulsing with a dim, cold light. I reached for it, but his hand shot out, gripping my wrist. "Not yet. If we open it now, they'll know exactly where we're going." The scraping grew louder, closer, and dust drifted down from the ceiling. Then, a soft, deliberate knock. 3 times. The sound was wrong somehow, too deep for wood. He pulled me toward the far wall, where a low hatch sat half-hidden under a torn tarp. We crawled through into a crawl space that smelled of earth and rust. The floor was dirt, damp under my palms. We moved forward until we hit another wall, this one concrete, with a single thin seam running down the middle. "Help me," he said, pushing against it. It didn't budge. The scraping sound was behind us now, in the crawl space, and I could feel the air shift with each drag. He swore, shoved me aside, and yanked the journal from my bag. Without hesitation, he flipped it open. The pages whipped by themselves, stopping on one covered in cramped handwriting that seemed to blur even as I looked at it. He pressed his palm to the page, and the seam in the wall split open with a low hiss. Cold air rushed through, smelling faintly of rain and something sweeter, almost like ripe fruit. "Go," he said, shoving me through. I stumbled into a narrow alley that wasn't our city. The light was different here, softer but tinted faintly green, and the buildings were wrong, taller, with narrow windows and sharp, sloping roofs. The air hummed faintly, like a constant low note from an unseen instrument. He stepped through after me, and the wall sealed behind us, the seam vanishing entirely. "We have a few minutes," he said. "Maybe less." We ran, weaving through the strange streets. People stared as we passed, their eyes pale, almost translucent, and I realized none of them were speaking to each other. No voices, no footsteps, just the low hum. "What is this place?" I asked, but he didn't answer. Finally, we reached a small courtyard with a stone fountain in the center, the water perfectly still. He knelt beside it, placing the journal on the edge. "This is where the choice happens," he said. "The journal will give us 2 paths. One will let us disappear completely. The other will stop them from crossing into your reality, but it will cost more than you're ready for." My hands shook as I reached for the journal. It opened without touch this time, 2 pages glowing faintly. On the left, an image, the 2 of us walking away down a road lined with dark trees. On the right, another image, me standing alone, the city behind me burning in slow motion, the sky cracked open above it. "If we take the first path, we survive," he said. "The second, it's the only way to close the breach. But it means one of us won't make it." The humming in the air grew louder, sharper, and I realized it wasn't coming from the city. It was coming from above. I looked up and saw the sky bending, rippling, and then tearing open to reveal a dark shape moving on the other side. He grabbed my arm. "Decide. Now." My throat felt dry, my mind splitting between the selfish urge to live and the crushing weight of letting that thing through. I could see the fear in his face, but also something else, resignation. He knew which choice he wanted me to make. I reached out, my fingers brushing the second page. His hand shot out, grabbing mine, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Then he smiled, small and tired. "You don't have to carry this. I'll do it." Before I could stop him, he slammed his palm down on the second page. The fountain erupted, water shooting upward in a silent column that wrapped around him like glass. The hum became a roar in my head, and light poured from the journal, blinding white that burned against my closed eyelids. I felt the ground shake, heard the crack in the sky seal with a sound like tearing fabric in reverse. When the light faded, he was gone. The journal lay closed on the stone, still warm. And the courtyard was silent. The courtyard felt emptier than it should. No wind, no footsteps, just the faint smell of wet stone and the closed journal at my feet. I crouched down, touching its cover, half expecting it to pulse with that strange cold light again. Nothing. It was just leather now, worn and scratched, as if it had been sitting in the rain for years. My chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with running. I looked at the spot where he had stood moments ago. Not a trace. No scorch marks. no water on the ground, no sign he'd ever been there. And yet my mind replayed his expression, that tired half-smile, like he'd known all along that this was the way it would end for him. The silence pressed against me until it felt physical, and I realized the people in this place were gone too. The pale-eyed watchers, the ones who had stared but never spoken. The streets were empty now. Every window dark, every doorway shut. The city felt abandoned, as if the act of sealing the breach had erased more than just the threat above. My fingers tightened around the journal. I could leave now. The seam in the wall had to be somewhere. Maybe it would open for me, take me back home, where nothing would make sense, but at least the streets would have voices and movement and life. But what if closing the breach here hadn't been enough? What if something else had slipped through before he stopped it? The thought sent a ripple of unease through me. I opened the journal, flipping past page after page of cramped handwriting and strange diagrams. They were all faint now, as if fading from the paper itself, until I reached the very last page. It was blank, except for a single sentence, written in his sharp, deliberate script. If you're reading this, you still have time. My breath caught. Time for what? To go back? To undo what he did? Or to finish something he couldn't? I looked up, and the city around me seemed to shift. The buildings leaned slightly, their roofs stretching taller, as if the reality here was bending in on itself. I took a step toward the nearest street, but the ground felt soft, like walking on packed snow that threatened to give way. Then I heard it. Not the hum, not the roar from before, but something smaller. A voice, distant, muffled, like it was coming from under the ground. It was saying my name. I froze, scanning the empty streets. "I know you hear me," it said louder now. It wasn't his voice. It was colder, slower, every syllable deliberate. "You've opened more than you've closed." I didn't answer. My grip on the journal tightened until my knuckles ached. One choice left, the voice said. "Leave, and watch your world rot. Or stay, and hold this one together." The street under my feet buckled, a crack running across it, revealing a dark void beneath. The smell of rain and ripe fruit wafted up again, sweet but wrong. My chest tightened. If I stayed, I'd be trapped in this place, patching the walls between realities like someone trying to hold back an ocean with bare hands. If I left, I'd carry the journal back, and whatever followed me through would make sure his sacrifice meant nothing. I wanted to scream at the voice, to demand answers, but deep down I knew it didn't matter. There wasn't going to be a third option. The crack widened, and the voice whispered again, almost gentle this time. "Decide." My mind flashed to my apartment back home. The little plant on the windowsill I'd forgotten to water, the half-finished cup of coffee on the counter. Small, stupid things, but they were mine. And then I thought of him. The way he had shoved me through that wall without hesitation, choosing the cost himself. He had given me this choice, maybe even trusted me to make the one he couldn't. I closed the journal. The seam appeared in the wall ahead, just as it had before. I walked toward it, every step heavier than the last, until I was standing right in front of it. The air on the other side smelled like home. I could reach out and be back in seconds. My hand hovered over the wall. Behind me, the crack in the street groaned wider. The voice was silent now, waiting. I stayed there for a long time, my fingers inches from escape, my mind balancing between two worlds. Then I stepped back. The seam closed,